In this video, we're going to look at the process for solving two-step equations. So let's go ahead and take a look at our first example. We have here 5x plus 32 equals 17. We know, like with any equation, the way we solve is by isolating our variable. And we can see here that we have two numbers keeping our variable x from being alone, a 5 and a 32. So we need to get rid of both, but we need to do it in the correct order. So what is that correct order and where does it come from? Well, you need to understand that when we are solving equations, what we are actually doing is working backwards because we are undoing operations. So if you think of the normal order for doing math, many of us call that PEMDAS, for the order of parentheses in any groupings, then exponents, then multiplication or division from left to right, then addition or subtraction from left to right. But if we're undoing and working backwards when we solve an equation, what we are actually doing is following PEMDAS in a reverse order. And if you want, you can go ahead and call that SADMEP. So when we're looking for our first step here in solving a two-step equation, we have to undo any addition or subtraction because we're working backwards. So that is actually the first step for solving a two-step equation, is to undo any addition or subtraction in the equation. So here we have to determine whether or not the 5 or the 32 is addition or subtraction, right? Well, obviously there's no minus signs here, so it's going to be addition. But if you're confused as to which one of these is the addition, remember that this 5 is right next to the variable x with no signs in between, so that is multiplication. So we know we need to get rid of this positive 32, so we're going to subtract 32 from both sides. So we end up with 5x equals negative 15. And once you perform the first step in solving a two-step equation, you're left with a basic one-step equation is what you're left with, right? But if we look again at the process, well, next, after undoing any addition or subtraction, that would be undoing any multiplication or division. So that is our second step here. Undo any multiplication or division. So here we see that we have to undo the 5. 5 is multiplying x, so we have to divide both sides by 5. And so negative 15 divided by positive 5 is negative 3, because negative divided by positive equals negative. All right, this next example says 10 equals negative 5 minus x over 3. So our first step, once again, is undo any addition or subtraction. And so we see here that we've got an x, and we've got a negative 5, and we have a denominator of 3. So since this 3 is a denominator, we know that that's division. So we have to get rid of this negative 5. So in order to get rid of a negative 5, I need to add 5 to both sides. This cancels out. On the left, I have a 15. And on the right, I'm going to have this negative x over 3. So for the purposes of what we're doing, I'm going to take this negative, and when I write it down here, I'm going to write it next to the 3. Now this works because when you have a negative fraction, you can write that negative sign wherever you want. You could write it next to the numerator, you could write it next to the denominator, or you could write it in the middle. It's still a negative fraction. So here I have 15 equals x over, or x divided by, negative 3. And we come to our second step, which is undo any multiplication or division. So here I have to undo division by negative 3, which means I need to multiply both sides of this equation by negative 3. Over here on the right side, these cancel each other out, leaving me with my x. And on the left side, I have negative 3 times 15, which is negative 45. All right, so in this next example, we have 7/12 x minus 1/3 equals 2. And this might look a little more confusing because it's got fractions in it, but it's the same process. So step 1 is still undo any addition or subtraction. So I have your 7/12 and I have your negative 1/3. The 7/12 is right next to x with no signs in between, so that's multiplication. So I have to get rid of negative 1/3. So I'm going to add 1/3 to both sides. These cancel out. I'm left with a 7/12 x on the left-hand side. Now on the right, I know that 2 plus 1/3 is 2 1/3. But what I recommend is that you take this whole number and rewrite it as a fraction so that you have common denominators. So what numerator would I have to put over this denominator of 3 to make it equal to 2? And that would be 6. 6/3 is the same as 2. And so I can do 6/3 plus 1/3, that's 7/3. Now you might be wondering, why did you do that? I know that 2 plus 1/3 is 2 1/3. True. Had you written 2 1/3 down here, when you go to flip and multiply, you would end up having to convert that 2 1/3 into an improper fraction anyways. So in this method, I already have that done. So our next step is to undo any multiplication or division. And the way we undo multiplication by a fraction is we flip and multiply. So we're going to multiply both sides of this equation by 12/7. So on the left, they cancel each other out, leaving me with 1x. And on the right, I could do some cross simplifying. 7 and 7 can be divided by themselves, leaving me with a 1 and a 1 here. And 12 and 3 can both be divided by 3. So 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. So 1 times 4 is 4, and 1 times 1 is 1, and 4/1 equals 4. All right, so I want to show you this last equation here because this is an exception to the rule. So we see here we have x plus 9 over 2 equals 4. And we know that the first step for solving a two-step equation is to undo addition or subtraction. So you might think, well, let's get rid of this plus 9. The problem is, in this example, we can't. And that's because the x plus 9 is the numerator of this fraction. And since it's the numerator of this fraction, we can't get at that plus 9 to get rid of it until we undo this being a fraction. So how do we undo this fraction? We have to get rid of the denominator. And so what is 2 doing to x plus 9? It's dividing it, right? So how do we undo division by 2? We multiply. So in this case, we actually have to multiply first. So we're going to multiply both sides by 2. This cancels out. On the left now, I have x plus 9. And on the right, 4 times 2 is 8. And now that we multiplied by 2, we have released x plus 9 from the fraction, and now we can take care of this plus 9. How do we get rid of positive 9? By subtracting 9 from both sides. This cancels out, and I'm left with x equals negative 1. All right, I hope this video helped you to understand the process for solving two-step equations.